Hey all, well, it's been really crazy few weeks here. If you subscribe to the channel, you've probably already seen that I have not been on very much, and I'm hoping to change that in the near future. But um, work and home life have been a little crazy, and so of course those take priority over me ranting on YouTube. As much as I enjoy that, and as much as I'm sure you enjoy it too. I actually wanted to talk about this a few weeks ago, but I ran out of time and then I forgot. Okay, but I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the big kind of categories of my podcasts are true crime, particularly wrongful conviction stuff. And so, obviously, like pretty much everybody else, I got hooked on that because of Serial, and moved on from that to Undisclosed and Truth and Justice, and I listened to these pretty darn faithfully, and we're good ways into the new season of Undisclosed right now, and they're doing things a little bit differently. If you haven't heard it, there are three hosts of the show, and the first season they were talking about Adnan Syed, and then the second season they took on a different case. But in the third season, each host is taking a different case and then presenting the case. And so the first one was Colin under, and he did the wrongful conviction of Jamar Huggins, and this was they're on to their second case right now, which I'll probably have comments on later. But this one was really interesting to me because from what I understand of the presentation, and obviously I'm a slave to my sources here. What I know is what has been presented, but what it seems like is that he he was convicted on the testimony of one witness that actually recanted on the stand. And so it wasn't, they brought in her statement from when the detectives talked to her the first time, and presented that as evidence, when actually on the stand she's like, no, that I wasn't telling the truth and he did not do it. And so so basically got convicted on the unsworn evidence of someone not in the courtroom, and someone who, when sworn, said the opposite. And to me, this brings up a lot of issues, like being able to face your accuser. Because this is what hearsay laws are all about: is that you can't face your accuser. And this is a case where how do you cross examine somebody from a year ago when that person's story has changed today? And so a lot of issues here, but I had intended to do this, but I was reminded when Apologia Radio did a program, and and I think it's their most recent one, as of right now. I'll put a link in the notes here. But one of the things they were talking about is the biblical standard of having two or three witnesses to establish a fact. And as and look, I know y'all are going to be able to present an exception to me, but this is not an exhaustive statement. But from the cases that I have listened to on many podcasts, these wrongful convictions are coming up when we're not looking for testimony of two or three independent lines of evidence. When we are going off one person or one thing, or in the case of Adnan Syed, you have Jay and the cell phone evidence, but they're not independent. Jay's basing his testimony off the cell phone evidence, and when they realize they have the wrong cell phone evidence, his testimony changes. And then has changed 3 or 4 more times. But and guys, look, and I know there are a lot of you out there who believe Adnan is guilty, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. What I would ask you is, where are your 2 or 3 lines of independent evidence? And I haven't seen it yet, and doesn't mean it's not out there, but I haven't seen it. And it doesn't seem to be the case with Jamar Huggins, and it doesn't. And And when you're looking at like Stephen Avery, especially his first conviction, where you have one eyewitness who's now proven wrong, and everybody knows, in the rape case, and I'm not talking about the murder. That's opening up a whole new can of worms, right? But on the rape case, I haven't seen anybody who thinks he was actually guilty of that. And this is a case where we had one eyewitness, and eyewitnesses have been proven wrong countless times. And all these, without substantiation, all of these lines of evidence, even DNA, can be wrong, can misidentify someone. In the case of, and I feel like we all kind of freak out about DNA, and it's a fantastic tool, and I'm so glad it was developed. But you need something else there. Just because my DNA is somewhere doesn't actually prove anything, and unless you have some other source of evidence that puts me there for that crime. And that's the trouble with all of this. And that's we chose the standard of one witness, of one line of evidence, to make things easier on prosecutors to get, because we're, all for justice and the rule of law, and we need these criminals in jail, so we lower the standard. And then we lower the standard below what God told us the standard should be. And we get a bunch of innocent people in prison. And that's exactly why God set the standard there. And I know you're going to come back and say, well, isn't that going to mean that more criminals remain on the street? And if that's the only thing we change, then sure, probably so. And I'll say the Word of God anticipates that there will be some unsolved murders and such. But that also is going to lead us into a much bigger discussion about changing the entirety of the criminal justice system. But I'm particularly interested in this point because, look, I can write my congressman all day long about all the different stuff I'd like to change in the criminal justice system. But this is one thing that I do have power over, because when I'm called for jury, I can hold them. I can hold the prosecution to God's standard, whether or not the judge does. We are allowed. We are allowed in our criminal justice system to do something called jury nullification, which is basically we have, according to the government, enough evidence, but we still refuse to convict for moral reasons, that we don't agree with the law, we don't agree with the standard of evidence, and it is totally accepted. It's totally legal in our criminal justice system when the state says, I have one witness, and when the judge says one should be enough for you to convict, for me to say no, it's not, and I'm not going to convict over one. You need to present for me at least two independent lines of evidence before I convict somebody of a crime. This is something that we can do today. This is something that, and I was a clerk in a misdemeanor court for a while, and I would hear this all the time, that in voir dire, which is when we question the jurors about their beliefs and all that, and they would ask them, would you have a problem convicting just on the word of the police officer? In that case, now I'd raise my hand. I'd probably be kicked off the jury, but I'll have a chance to defend God's standard and why that's so important, and why all of these wrongful convictions, people going to prison for decades, sometimes for the rest of their lives, sometimes even executed for crimes they didn't commit, because we would rather give the prosecution a break. and make it easier for them to put people away than to abide by God's law. So this is something that I hope to be talking about more this year. I think with in the wake of Serial, in the wake of all these podcasts, we are, as a country, starting to get serious about reforming the criminal justice system, and we have this scattergun approach with ideas, and they're just all over the place, and most of it is just, us trying to tweak things. But what I would hope and what I would encourage is, while we're in there tweaking things, why don't we look to the Bible? Why don't we look to God's standard for what He wants in criminal justice, and get back to that? I mean, He's told us that His law is good. He told us that His law is just. And when we actually use it, I think that we're going to find that it actually is good and it actually is just. So thank y'all for watching, and hope to talk to y'all again soon.